Hello all of you beautiful people, Jules here for Whatculture.com. And you know what, no matter how bad the final product might turn out to be, every single movie that gets made has been meticulously mapped out, right down to those fine, seemingly irrelevant details. Everything from the props, to the camera angles, to the weather conditions, to the number of extras that populate a scene, everything has been thought out. Because after all, nobody sets out to make a bad movie, but the problem is that while everything might be there on paper, when it comes to practice, sometimes things can go awry. With either extras doing things you didn't expect, random happenstance happening randomly, or even just little acts of nature that nobody could have predicted ever happening. So with this in mind, this is Whatculture.com, and these are movies that accidentally film things you weren't supposed to see. A paperboy falls off his bike and breaks his wrist while you were sleeping. Now, While You Were Sleeping is a by-the-numbers yet rather fun romantic comedy starring Sandra Bullock and Bill Pullman. But you know what? Most people who remember the film don't talk about its story or its characters, they only talk about the iconic Paperboy scene. A transition shot that plays roughly 31 minutes into the film shows a bike-riding Paperboy speeding down a snowy suburban pathway. Now, because frosty weather and speeding vehicles is a dangerous combination, you can probably guess what's going to happen next. And you'd be right. After tossing a couple of papers, the poor young lad tumbles, crashing to the ground in a rather hilarious fashion. For the performer's sake, you'd have hoped that small moment of comedy was a planned stunt because it looked like quite a particularly painful fall. In reality though, this shot was captured completely accidentally and the actor even broke his wrist as a result. Ouch.
A crew member in jeans, Gladiator. Arguably the most famous mistake in Ridley Scott's Gladiator is the one that never actually existed. It became commonly believed that there could be a plane seen above Russell Crowe's head at a certain point during the film, though this was never actually the case. That doesn't mean, however, that there aren't any glaring mistakes to be found. Even seeing the gas canister underneath a capsized chariot doesn't take the cake when it comes to accidental inclusions in the winner of Best Picture at the 73rd Academy Awards. No, this honour goes to a certain cameraman who sticks out like a sore thumb. Naturally, while the characters on screen were dressed to bring the illusion of ancient Rome to life, those working behind the scenes would not have had to make such effort. They were supposed to stay behind the scenes after all, but when a cameraman and his camera did make it into the shot, it was a little too obvious to ignore. Just after Maximus Decimus Meridius utters his most iconic line, asking the audience if they are not entertained, to the left side of the screen a crew member in a white t-shirt and jeans can be spotted, completely breaking the illusion. Ironically, this is just one frame removed from where the phantom plane was supposedly flying overhead.
A stray cat interrupts Ryan Gosling in the middle of a scene. Half Nelson. Movie scenes that involve animals usually need to be planned out much more than most, often with the help of a professional animal trainer, but you know what? This was not the case here. The 2006 drama Half Nelson stars Ryan Gosling as Dan, a history teacher struggling with a drug addiction. Dan also owns a cat called Dave, and because this is one of the only meaningful connections in his life, it's absolutely heartbreaking when Dave passes away midway through the movie. A short while later, Dan is talking with a local drug dealer, Frank, when he spots a stray cat on the ground and decides to pick it up. Now at first this might just seem like a clever bit of writing. After all, Dan has just lost his own feline friend, so it would make sense that he feels sympathetic towards a homeless one, but in reality this was never supposed to happen. The cat wasn't just a stray in the movie, it was also a stray in real life, but rather than shooing it away when it wandered around the scene, Gosling decided to pick it up instead, creating a profound moment for his character in the process.
Firefighter getting hit by the ladder, Christmas with the Cranks. When you think of Christmas movies, typically the same classics come to mind straight away. It's not particularly bad by any stretch, but it's not exactly all that memorable either. However, there is one moment that once seen can never be forgotten and can never go unnoticed again. The events of the film revolve around the titular Cranks deciding to skip Christmas since their daughter is away, only to discover over the course of the story what a bad idea it is. At one point, Tim Allen's Luther Crank tries to frantically decorate his house, only to get stuck and have the fire department come out to rescue him. As the firefighters arrive, one unfortunate extra gets clattered by the trailing end of a ladder after being taken off the truck. No one on screen pays any mind to it, while the actor himself continues as if nothing happened. But once you know to look for it, it becomes a bit impossible to watch the scene normally again, and you just feel bad for him.
There's a missing painting hanging on the living room wall. Stuart Little. In 1999's Stuart Little, many scenes take place in the Little household, where a painting can be seen on the wall in the background. Now, to the average viewer, this painting won't seem particularly special and they probably won't even notice it, but to art historian Gregory Barkey, it represented one of the most exciting finds of his career. This is because that prop painting was actually a long-lost masterpiece that had disappeared in the 1920s. The filmmakers, unaware of its true value, bought it in an antique shop for a low price and used it to dress the Littles' living room, and it wasn't until 2009 that it was finally spotted by Barkey, who noticed it immediately while watching the movie with his daughter. The painting eventually sold at a 2014 auction for an eye-watering £182,000. Who knew that there was a small fortune hiding in the background of this rather unassuming family adventure? Well, clearly not the filmmakers.
Ghost Boy, 3 Men and a Baby. Back in 1987, 3 Men and a Baby took the cinematic world by storm. However, its biggest story had nothing to do with its success, or even anything to do with the plot. The film, in which Tom Selleck, Steve Guttenberg and Ted Danson's characters all came together to raise a child, featured a scene that seemingly showed a young boy in the background who had no right being there. If the rumours and legends were to be believed, the scene featured a ghost. As Jack and his mother walked through the house holding the baby, behind a curtain there could be very clearly seen a young boy who many believed at the time to be a ghost. Some thought that the child had died of natural causes, while others believed he had taken his life, and almost all agreed that the set of the movie was haunted. The truth, as explained by Jimmy Fallon when Tom Selleck was a guest on The Tonight Show, was that the image was actually a cardboard cutout of Danson's character from a scene that was ultimately cut. The prop was accidentally left in the background of a scene that ended up causing one of the biggest urban legends in recent film history.
An unknown man throws his dog into the water. Mr. Nanny. Starring the one and only Hulk Hogan, the atrocious 1993 comedy Mr. Nanny would have definitely faded into obscurity at this point, if not for a highly unusual moment that accidentally made its way onto the big screen. During an early scene where the Hulkster rides his bike down a series of roads, a man can be spotted in the background casually chucking his dog into the water. No, you didn't mishear me, that is literally what happens. Hogan doesn't react to this strange sight and it's clearly not meant to be part of the scene, and yet almost 30 years later, it's pretty much the only thing that people remember about this movie. While the first conclusion that many people jump to is that the unknown man is being cruel to his dog, others have actually suggested that he's actually teaching the animal how to swim by throwing it in at the deep end, quite literally. Whatever the case may be though, let's just hope that the dog was safe and sound, right?
A flashing fan, Teen Wolf. 3 Men and a Baby's Ghost Boy wasn't the only urban legend that's been built off the back of something strange happening in the background of a movie. Whereas this was the apparent image of a child, Teen Wolf kickstarted a far more adult-themed legend thanks to one spectator in the final images of the film. After a couple of hours of Michael J. Fox's Wolfman teenager Scott Howard playing basketball, his team ultimately wins the championship game. In the background of the wild celebrations appears to be a man exposing himself for all to see. This became more famous than anything else from the movie, and is still to this day a part of pop culture legend. There have been those that have debunked the thought that it is a naked man, and instead claimed that it is a woman, showing nothing that would have changed Teen Wolf's rating considerably had it been noticed beforehand. However, regardless of whether it's a man in the bleachers going full frontal, or a more innocent person with just their zip undone, for some strange reason, it's unlikely that it was ever intended to be in the final cut.
Steven Spielberg captured a real shooting star. Jaws. One of Steven Spielberg's directorial signatures is that he likes to include shooting stars in the backgrounds of his movies, from Close Encounters of the Third Kind to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. However, many people don't know that this all started because of a real event that Spielberg accidentally captured while filming his breakout hit Jaws. Shortly after the night scene where Quint, Hooper and Brody all get drunk and start singing together, Brody heads out onto the deck of their boat and pulls a gun from his bag. At this point, a shooting star soars through the night sky just behind his head. And apparently, this wasn't actually added in post-production, it was a real natural occurrence. Spielberg was just incredibly fortunate to have his camera rolling in the right place and at the right time. Interestingly, he's been fascinated with meteor showers ever since he was a kid, which makes this moment even more amazing.
Fingers in the Ears, North by Northwest. Alfred Hitchcock is widely regarded as one of the greatest directors, not just of his generation, but of all time. However, even the best of the best aren't flawless, and there's one moment in North by Northwest that proves such a rule, albeit in an undeniably adorable way. They say not to work with animals or children, the latter of which even Hitchcock couldn't navigate without an issue. During one scene of the film, Eve Kendall pulls out a gun and shoots a blank at Roger Thornhill in a crowded diner. The commotion starts when the trigger is pulled, but until that moment, no one in the background of the scene is supposed to know what is coming. Something that is betrayed by a small boy putting his fingers in his ears to block the sound before the gun is even visible to him. There was something sweet about the innocence of the young extra, and clearly the movie hasn't suffered because of it. Instead, it is just remembered as a small and inconsequential mistake in an otherwise outstanding picture.
A stunt driver accidentally crashed into an unsuspecting civilian. The French Connection. Classic 1971 action thriller The French Connection contains one of the most iconic vehicle chases in movie history, with Gene Hackman's detective Jimmy Doyle speeding through New York's crowded downtown streets. But amazingly, very little about this sequence was actually planned in advance. This is because director William Friedkin didn't actually have all the permits he needed to film on the streets. As such, there was very little traffic control, and basically the whole thing was improvised, with stunt driver Bill Hickman dodging and weaving at high speeds past ordinary civilian cars who had no idea that a chase was being filmed. It isn't an exaggeration to say that this sequence was life-threatening to shoot, and this danger was made perfectly clear when the stunt car accidentally smashed into an unsuspecting white Ford, causing significant damage to both vehicles. As with all other close calls during the chase, the incident was completely unplanned. Reportedly, the man whose car was hit was just on his morning work commute and was simply unlucky enough to get caught up in the action.
A Car in the Shire, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. Not every movie has the same opportunity to cover up its mistakes like Shazam. The crew that was filmed could be relatively easy to be transformed into part of the crowded mall scene, but Peter Jackson had a bigger problem when a car appeared in the background of The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. It's one of the many scenes that paint Samwise Gamgee as the reluctant hero as he stops in his tracks to comment on one more step being the farthest away from home he's ever been. In the background of the theatrical release, a car and the subsequent dust it kicked up from the road could be seen. Hiding a vehicle like this in the Shire is a much greater task than people in a busy shopping centre, so for the DVD release, Jackson removed the car altogether. Unfortunately, it seems that enough people noticed the anomaly in the first place that it became something of a sticking point. Eventually, despite denying the car's existence to begin with, Jackson admitted to the gaffe. Perhaps if it could have been blended in some way, those who noticed it may have thought they were initially mistaken. But the fact that there was nothing there at all on the home release proved to be just a bit too suspicious. Spider-Man Extras, Cherry. With his performance as the titular character in 2021's Cherry, Tom Holland couldn't have been further from the world of Spider-Man, dealing with heavy issues like addiction and PTSD. Even in this environment, however, he couldn't be free of his Marvel reputation, thanks to some extras that surely wouldn't have been kept in the final cut had they been cut before release. As Holland's Cherry lay on the floor, surrounded by lots of moving extras, two can be seen circling the actor and making the infamous Spider-Man hand sign. As a story focusing on deep and serious issues, a moment like this destroys the suspension of disbelief and makes it much harder to take it seriously.